Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. You can follow me on X at Movies TV Mad and on Instagram and on Threads at Movies TV Mad X. A very warm welcome to Friday's edition of the DC Universe Daily. So I'm recording this on Superman's birthday, the day before you actually see this video. And I know this video won't get a lot of views because it's just called Happy Birthday Superman, and that's okay. But even though you're getting this video a day late, and unfortunately because of the length I want to do this video and because of different things, I can't release this video and upload it on the day of Superman's birthday. But the things we love are subjective. You know, you'll be seeing me, a 51-year-old geezer, talking about DC and films, sometimes even cartoons or whatever, right? And thinking, you're 51 years old, dude, get a life. But the thing is, it's a bit late for me to get a life. This is me. The reason I get motivated to get up from my bed every morning is this shit. Because of Superman, because of Batman, because of Spidey, because of the Hulk, because of Michael Knight, Sam Beckett, whatever, right? I could be here all day listing you the fictional characters that motivate me. It's having an opinion. It's all this stuff. That's the reason that at 51 years old, I'm motivated to get out of my bed. And there's always something to look forward to, even though entertainment isn't as exciting as it was when I was growing up. It's not even as exciting as it was in the 90s or the early noughties or whatever. But there's still a few morsels to get excited about. But today, it's about talking about my love for Superman, which I've spoke about on this channel. My experiences through my favourite character in fiction, my hero, my ultimate hero, Superman, has been through live action, television, and film and animation. I don't read Superman comics. Calm down! Don't order a hit on me, man. But I respect the fact that without the comics, without Jerry and Joe on a hot night in Cleveland, I wouldn't have a hero to look up to. So I respect the comics, but I'm not a comic book reader in general. But Jerry and Joe in the 1930s, you know, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, they were running around on a hot night in Cleveland, coming up with this idea. You know, comic book writers and artists were celebrities in the late 20s and 30s, and Jerry and Joe wanted some of that. So they decided to create a character called Superman. But at first, he was a bald madman. And people, these comic book companies said no. Then they tried to refine it and they thought, well, why can't he be a hero? Let's dress him as a circus acrobat. And they did. And then comic book companies still said no until Detective Comics come up with a feature called Action Comics, a new comic book. And they thought Superman would be perfect. From the very moment that original cover was released and the original comic book was released, all these years later, Superman has captivated people and opened their imagination. Superman today has a very different canon, a different kind of story backing him up than he did in Jerry and Joe's original story. The radio show came up with Kryptonite, with Perry White, with the Daily Planet instead of the Daily Star. But I don't think that's a bad thing for Jerry and Joe. They created something that opened people's minds and created new things for it. And wow, the first superhero. Superman isn't relevant because he's the first. He's relevant to me because I believe subjectively he's the greatest. I believe that. There's a lot of people that will tell you Superman is your grandmother and grandfather's and your uncle's superhero. And I suppose that's true. Maybe, as when my nephews and nieces were kids, I would show them Superman the movie all the time, or Man of Steel. I wanted them to see why I loved Superman. Superman has been very, very pivotal and vital to me. As a young boy with learning difficulties, and I self-diagnosed myself as with dyslexia, which is basically a disability many years ago. That's a factual thing. I am dyslexic, but growing up, I didn't actually know that I was dyslexic, but I was in a special needs school. I had to take special lessons when I went to secondary school. So growing up for me was very difficult. And back then, your parents weren't kind of I don't know what to say. I think my parents were kind of ashamed that I was slow. And my brother, who was 10 months younger than me, was clever, he was smart, he was confident. He was the very opposite of me. So they were proud of him. And probably, although they loved me, let's be honest, they were probably a little bit ashamed of their slow son, who had behavioural problems, who didn't start talking till he was 1.5 years old. The nursery thought there was a problem with me, right? A psychological problem. Let's be honest, with the way you see me on social media and on YouTube and, everything else, I probably have got a few psychological problems. I'm not going to pretend there's not a few screw looses up there. So it was very difficult for me. So I found television because my parents didn't used to take us to the cinema. So all the great films I discovered and watched were through me sitting on the kitchen floor watching TV. My TV was my heart, and as pathetic as it sounds, my life. Life was so much better through that magical box. And then I discovered something, a VHS recorder that my dad bought for the family. And I used to get the blank tapes, or get my dad to bring in the blank tapes, and I used to record films and pause the adverts. So that TV, film, television, light entertainment, everything, it was my fucking life. And I had an opinion on everything. Slowly as a young boy, I bought myself an audio cassette with a built-in microphone. I used to improvise my own soap operas, playing all the characters. These were the things that kept me going as a child, and the number one thing was Superman. He has been there throughout my life at the lowest times. When I was living in shared accommodation, and I was really, really depressed about that. When people turned their backs on me, probably because I'm an arsehole and deserved it, he was always there for me. I remember Smallville was on when I was living in shared accommodation. That show, Clark Kent, was my inspiration. He was the angel on my shoulder. Superman has always been an angel on my shoulder. From the very first moment I met him and was introduced to him via Superman the movie. It was an amazing moment to watch that film and to see that man, an alien from another planet who doesn't want to conquer the world, doesn't want to own us, doesn't want to dominate us with his power. He just wants to be a friend. That's who Superman is, a friend. Superman isn't a god. He's a friend with the power of a god that can make different decisions. But thanks to Jonathan and Martha Kent, the salt of the earth, thanks to their Midwestern values, they taught him the right lessons. And this is perfectly depicted in the Smallville television show. Some brilliant advice from Jonathan Kent, from the brilliant John Schneider, who really believed in the role and really believed in that father and son kind of relationship. And it was amazing. Superman is kind of out of fashion today because we live in such a cynical world. We live in a cynical world. The youth of today are very cynical. But there's one big problem. There's a war on men. There's a war on male characters. When I was growing up, it was all about male characters, and it was different. We had a few female characters, but let's be honest, it was mostly about male heroes and male villains. If we're being honest, rightly or wrongly, that's the way that it was. And we can't change what the product of those times were. You can't rewrite history, no matter how hard Gen Z want to. And that's the problem, because Superman is the archetypal good man. And these days, Gen Z believe that even good men are a problem. They hate all men. Well, apart from the minorities and the disabled men, they're all right. And the gay men are all right. I think they like the gay men. They're cool. But us straight dudes, we're problematic. But anyway, this is not supposed to be a negative video. We're celebrating Superman's birthday. And isn't that a very special occasion? It is if you love him. I mean, I know many lads and lasses, you know, boys and girls who grew up with this character, who remember Superman the movie and how special that movie was. Why is Superman the movie still the movie that inspires directors, even today? What was it about that movie? Well, Richard Donner, the director, really believed not to mess with the myth. He grew up reading Superman and watching Superman. He believed in this character. He realized that this character was American mythology, Americana, and he didn't want to mess with that. So when he came in, you know, the project was already in production by another director who had to step down. He didn't like what they'd done. He brought in his good friend Tom Mankiewicz to rewrite the entire script and the entire story. Now, Tom had rewritten a lot of pictures, including a lot of Bond movies. He'd been an actor, a not very successful actor. He could also direct as well. In fact, it was the plan for Tom Mankiewicz to write and direct Superman 3 and Superman 4. Something I found out listening to the commentary of the Donner cut. And if you get that opportunity, listen to Tom and Dick. They are amazing and they're really funny, but they're really insightful. And Dick really does provide some great nuggets. Of course, Dick Donner passed away some years back. I think he was about 90 years old. But the man created something pioneering. Superman the movie is a celebration of Superman. It's the first superhero blockbuster. Without this film, and I know we've discussed this before, but it's Superman's birthday. I'm of the belief, right, before we go any further, that every version of Superman on TV and film is valid. Whatever version you love is valid. And I'm not here to do down this version or that version. I can say something positive about every single live action version of Superman. Unlike some twats on the internet, I'm not here to say that what you love isn't valid or relevant. That's up to other assholes. If that's how they make money, if that's how their platforms are successful, that's not what Movies TV Mad is here to do. Here on Movies TV Mad, we are DC fans and we are Superman fans first and foremost. We're not really big Marvel fans, right? I admire Marvel. I think Captain America, the First Avenger, a movie reviled by a lot of Marvel fans, hate it. I think it's an amazing film, and I think it's probably the only superhero film that comes close to Superman the movie. Well, apart from Wonder Woman 2017, which also really has the spirit of Superman the movie, because Patty Jenkins is a huge fan of that movie. But Superman the movie, very, very important to me, very special. And Dick Donner really didn't want to mess with the myth, and he didn't. And Jerry and Joe, who created Superman, who launched it in comics in 1938, absolutely loved it. In fact, they gave Dick a Superman statue, a huge golden Superman statue. Richard Donner was crying, Siegel and Schuster were crying. They loved that film. But Jerry and Joe were shafted left, right and centre. They barely made any money on Superman. In fact, they got about $200 from DC. I don't know the full story, but they didn't make a lot of money. Throughout the years, WB tried to give them money. They kept on asking for Warner Brothers for more money, and Warner Brothers did oblige them quite a lot, but not enough. Because when you create the most famous character, fictional character in history, you should be a fucking billionaire. You should be laying on a fucking beach with no worries. And the way these two lads were treated was disgusting. And that should never be forgotten. So we remember Jerry and Joe because they created Superman. They created Superman to empower themselves because in the 1930s it was a bit of a scary time. I mean, we live in scary times today as well. Have I lost my picture? I wondered why my other picture had lightened up. There you go, look at that. Look at that beautiful poster. It's a pretty cool poster for Superman the movie as well. But anyway, so look, as a kid watching this movie, it was so exciting. And the Salkinds must be the dumbest producers in the history of producers because they fired Richard Donner, the director that made them so much money with Superman the movie. Look, I get, when you're a producer, right, you've got to worry about the money. Warner Brothers didn't fund Superman the movie. It was all on the Salkinds. They were independent producers and they didn't have an endless waterfall of money. And Dick Donner was trying to do things right and spending a lot of money. So they clashed and they argued, and I get it. But even so, and I don't think either of them were wrong for clashing over this stuff. They ain't got a lot of money. They're worried. They're worried about, going bankrupt and shit like that. They're getting scared, and Dick wants to make the greatest movie, right? But you don't sack the guy who made one of the greatest superhero movie of all time. Again, that's a subjective opinion, but this movie has inspired people. When you look at this movie today, some of this VFX is still fucking pioneering. You look at Superman flying after the missile in Superman the movie, it still looks amazing, even though it's a projection screen, even though he's just on a gimbal, because Christopher Reeve's body shape and body language was amazing. So some of the VFX, some of it's dated, but of course it would be. They didn't have computers. They invented new technologies. It's amazing to think of the achievements of this film. But with Richard Donner gone, they had to deliver a Superman 2. They decided to bring in Richard Lester, who they'd made a couple of Musketeer films with. A very good, capable director. And I mean, some people may say it's a Justice League situation. And in a way it is. But luckily for Lester, Richard Donner was shooting Superman the movie and Superman 2 together. So there was a lot of stuff there. And some of you may have seen the Donner cut, which I'll get into very, very shortly on my views of that film. But ultimately, Lester needed to direct his own scenes, some of his own scenes to have his name. Now, he wanted to have Donner's name with his name as director of Superman 2. But when Donner realised they were doing the whole Eiffel Tower, the whole Eiffel Tower thing in Superman 2, he said no, because he didn't like it. So they had done some own scenes. All the stuff with Ned Beatty and Gene Hackman was Dick Donner's, because Gene Hackman and Ned Beatty never returned to do reshoots for Superman 2 out of loyalty for Dick. So that film's put together, but they've got no Tom Mankiewicz for Superman 3. So then they have to do their own story. Superman 3 is an interesting film, if you ask me, because I don't think it's a good or great superhero movie or Superman movie, but I also don't think it's a bad one. Look, they over delve into the comedy, and it's definitely a vehicle for comedian Richard Pryor, who hated doing the flying sequences because he was afraid of heights. That would be me as well. I'd be shitting a brick. But it was a funny movie. Unlike DC films today and MCU films today, comic book films in general, Superman 3, even though it's too comedic, is actually funny. The heart of the movie is Annette O'Toole as Lana Lang. And Christopher Reeve is immense. Ross Webster, the villain, is just a poor man's Lex Luthor. But Robert Vaughn's performance is outstanding. There's some great moments. Evil Superman versus Clark Kent, iconic. Superman kicking the missiles onto each other, iconic. That Superman computer game, Atari-type computer game, looked fucking awesome. They invented that for the movie. Richard Lester was actually a capable visual director. And the freezing of the lake was awesome as well. There's so many great moments visually in Superman 3, so I don't think it's a bad movie, and it did make $100 million. Now, back then, that was a hell of a lot of money. There was no IMAX screens, there was half the movie houses back then, so that was a really good result. But critics hated that film. In reality, critics weren't overly sold on Superman 2 either, but the box office was there. Then they decided to do Supergirl, which flopped, and then Superman 4, they sold that to Golan Globus, and it didn't work out. And that was the end of the Reeve era. But there's so many great versions of Superman out there. And, you know, I'm proud of the different TV shows. The Lois and Clark show is a beautiful romantic comedy. Smallville is utterly pioneering. You know, created by Alfred Gough and Miles Miller. And one of the things with them was they actually understood who Clark Kent and Lex Luthor were at their core. This is a Cain and Abel television show. It's, you know, it's pre-Superman. It's a pre-Superman story that tells a pre-Cain and Abel show. They start off as friends. And that blew my mind when I was watching it. I was about 28 when season 1 of Smallville broadcast, and I was blown away that they had Lex Luthor, pre-Superman, living in Smallville, and he was, you know, friends with Clark Kent. And you actually believed it. And the exciting thing was you knew they had to become enemies, and it was amazing. And I saw the Lana stuff as a subplot. And I think we all got kind of drained by the Lana and Clark stuff, but it is pre-Superman, it is in Smallville. That's what the comics say, that Lana Lang was his childhood teenage sweetheart, so they went with it. What the great thing about Smallville was, it ticked different boxes for different people. You had Lana and Clark for the shippers. You know, you had Lex and Lionel for the people who, you know, were a bit more intelligent and wanted a bit of devil in their storytelling. You had Martha and Jonathan, you had Chloe, you had Pete, you know. Then you had like the fledgling Justice League when the season got up, when the show got older. It was an amazing show with an amazing achievement. I mean, they did drop the ball in the final season and in the series finale, if you ask me. It's clear they didn't have a big budget because, you may not know this, but budgets are reduced for final seasons and they didn't spend the budget they had well. So by the time they got to the finale, it was pretty clear they didn't have enough money to give us the ending we needed. But they had driven off the creators of the show, Alfred Gough and Miles Miller, a long time before that. And that's where the show didn't end the way it should have done, because there was no Alfred Gough and Miles Miller to finish it the way they should have finished it. And it was very, very sad for me. But all in all, Smallville was outstanding. And then we get to the whole Snyderverse saga, which is a saga within itself. It's a bit like Donna. And I mean, before we actually get into the Snyderverse, because it's something we've spoken about so many times, I want to talk about the Donna Cut just briefly and say the Donna Cut really is an incomplete movie. It's not the Donna Cut, it's as much of Donna's vision as possible with Richard Lester's footage in it as well, because Dick Donner didn't finish all the scenes he needed to make a complete movie. I've heard people say, well, the cinematic release of Superman 2 is better than the Donner Cut. It's an unfair comparison, and it's unfair to say that. What Superman 2, the Donner Cut, does is show you the potential of what Dick and Tom would have given us. I mean, listening to the commentary, they actually said that the three villains from Krypton would have been a lot darker and a lot scarier and a lot more frightening. It's clear there was the breadcrumbs of a much better Superman 2 than was actually released in theatres. Now, on to the Snyderverse of Superman. You see, Man of Steel was a very grounded film that was written by David S. Goyer and Christopher Nolan, the guys who gave us the Dark Knight trilogy. What could possibly go wrong? Well, for me, nothing, because I love the Snyderverse and I love Snyder's Superman. In fact, I remember sitting in the cinema watching Black Adam, and when Superman, Henry Cavill's Superman, pops up, in that post-credit scene, everyone's cheering, roaring, clapping. I haven't heard such a racket in a cinema since Tony Stark said, "I'm Iron Man," and clicked his fingers in Endgame. So that shows you, the sincerity and the, reverence and love that people hold for Henry Cavill's version of Superman. It's one thing they can't take away from the lad. Henry Cavill is done as Superman. Oh, well, so we think, but Henry Cavill seems even more indestructible than Superman himself. He keeps on coming back when we think he's not. But it looks like he's done. David Corenswet is now Superman. But the Snyderverse was a very interesting time, not just in Superman history, but in film itself, because you had an uncompromising filmmaker in Zack Snyder who said, "This is my vision, this is what I'm going to do." Then he made a Justice League movie where the studio said, we're going to recycle that, go away, leave us alone. The movie flopped, and he made sure that his version of the movie was released. He went to the mat. He went to the mattress. He fought. He went all Godfather. He fought and he won with the help of us, the fans. It was an amazing moment. All the videos are here of me helping to fight and help just a little bit, just a 1%, to release the Snyder Cut. So many videos. I remember them so well. I think I had hair. I looked very different, but that was me. And you can check out my historic videos here on my channel if you want, as evidence of that. So that was an interesting time. Ultimately, it's Superman who's the star, not the writers, not the directors. We need directors, we need visionaries, we need storytellers to write the stories. Of course we do. But for me, Superman has a life of his own. He's different to other heroes. He's utterly recognizable and he's utterly good. Superman isn't a cynical character, but can a character like that work in the modern day? Again, we have another director trying to make a Superman movie. They've all tried to captivate people's imagination. Bryan Singer tried it, Zack Snyder's tried it, and now James Gunn will also attempt to write, he's written, but direct a Superman movie. It's Superman's birthday, and we actually have a film in production, filming. If not today, very, very soon. Fans all over social media wondering if James Gunn will post a picture of the costume. I don't think that's going to happen, but you never know. It'll be interesting. We may get a picture of David Corenswet in the glasses. Who knows? And by the time you see this video, you'll already know what we've got. And I'll talk about that on Saturday's DC Universe Daily, of course. But this, to me, is a very, very special character. And for Superman to still motivate me at the age of 51, basically he's motivated me throughout my childhood, my teen years, my 20s, and now my adulthood. Excuse me. So that's important. That's inspirational. And it just shows you, once you get a bug for something, once you love something, and of course I'm very nostalgic for Superman. Superman was a big part of my childhood. We sat there as a family watching the first Superman movie. I remember, when we rented Superman 2 and Superman 3. As I say, we never used to go to the cinema. We did try and go and see Superman 3 in the cinema, but I think we had to watch Octopussy instead because Superman 3 was packed, basically, which was very, very disappointing. But I remember my dad putting on Superman 2 on video and screaming because he was so pissed off that they cut Marlon Brando out and fired Dick Donner. My dad was very, very angry about that, and he couldn't shut up for the entire movie. Personally, as a young kid, I loved watching Superman 2, right? I didn't really get all the look, when you watch Superman 2, especially in the opening, the theatrical version, and you can hear this guy talking, and it's not Marlon Brando, but it's supposed to be. And, you've got Susanna York instead of Marlon Brando, and Susanna York did a great job as Lara, Superman's mum. And I love that scene when she goes, "You can be hurt like an ordinary man." It always brings tears to my eyes. Absolutely hard. It's heartbreaking. But ultimately, that was very sad what happened there. That's just Hollywood for you, isn't it? And it's always been a thing. But Superman is beyond Hollywood. It's beyond any hatred, any negativity. Superman is about believing in people, inspiring people, saving people, being a friend.